Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my page 112 tag video for May 2026. This is also my Buzzwordathon cover pick video for May 2026, and if you want to go to that part of the video, click to this timestamp right here. But anyway, the page 112 tag was brought to BookTube by Sean Breathes Books. He based it off of a French literary prize, wherein they comprised the long list of said prize solely by reading page 112 of the books in contention. All of these books, I'm pretty sure, were novels, and page 112 was supposed to be somewhere in the middle of a standard novel, after all of the polished for editors pages when you get to the raw, real writing. And if you only read page 112 without the context of the rest of the story, technically you can only judge based on the quality of the writing. Unless you fudge things around, like I sometimes do here, thinking as I am right now about how pressed I am for time with the BookTube prize and my ballot being due at the end of the month, and how much it might be helpful to get a shorter book. Anyway, so I have been playing this game monthly since the start of COVID. I have this handy-dandy books and cats mug, and inside there are pieces of paper. These are all of my physical acquisitions on my shelves from 2025 or earlier. So each month I go in and I randomly pick out 3 pieces of paper with titles, and I read page 112 with you of the 3 books, and ultimately decide on one of the books to add to my month's TBR. So yeah, this is my fun, spontaneous TBR game that I like to play. I get pretty excited for it. There's nothing quite like, dipping your hand into a mug full of pieces of paper. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting with book number 1, I'm also hoping I won't quite have what I had last month when I got a repeat author, which could only happen with the same author, I think, because I have a few of his books on my shelves. But we shall see. See what this one brings. The Space Between Us by Thridi Umrigar. Well, that's not the repeat author. This, I believe, is a Indian author and I got her book from a very local used books and record shop, Moja Mala, that's just a few blocks away from me. I think I've also even played with this book before, so that would be less post-production. Huzzah! All right, and now moving on to book number 2. I tend to like a little bit of diversity, although a lot of these books are kind of the same for me. But, if I got it at a different time or place or slightly, different subject matter, we'll see what happens. All right. Last Summer at the Golden Hotel by Alyssa Friedland. I've had this book, I think, for a couple years as well. I think I might have gotten it from Solid State Books, one NaNoWriMo. I'll check and see, I suppose. I have too many books, that's why I'm playing this game. And this, I believe, is historical Jewish fiction about sort of the Borscht Belt era. So, yeah, it's a little bit different, and I'm excited to finally give it a go. And finally, book number 3. If I get that repeat author now, that would be fine, because I don't have him on, the list so far this month. But who knows? Let's see what this one is. Evening by Nessa Rappaport. I've played with this one as well a few times, I think, meaning I've had it on the TBR for a while. Might have been a used library book sale that I got it from for my friends at the library bookstore some time ago. It's also Jewish fiction. I'm not quite sure if it's historical or not. I should probably remember after playing with it so many times, but I'm going to go ahead and play with it again. Okay, you've seen me pick out these 3 books. I am going to go ahead and read them myself first to gather my thoughts, and then I'll be back with you in just a sec. Okay, I'm back and ready to go through these novels with you, starting with book number 1, The Space Between Us by Thridi Umrigar. When she woke up a few hours later, the bruises on her arm had shrunk. If they had originally looked like the map of the world, now they were down to the size of the map of Brazil. Any other time she would have been surprised, but after the dreamy strangeness of the message from Bima, anything seemed possible. She rose from the bed, slid her feet into her rubber slippers, and walked into the kitchen. Suddenly, she felt unaccountably shy in front of the woman who was leaning over the sink, scrubbing dishes with the same intensity with which she had rubbed her back a few hours ago. She wanted to thank Bima for her kindness, wanted to explain to her how hot and wonderful life felt when it trickled back into one's veins, wanted to tell her about how cold her heart had felt after this last encounter with Firaz and how Bima had warmed it again, as if she had held her cold gray heart between her brown hands and rubbed it until the blood came rushing back into it. But a net of shyness fell over Sarah as Bima looked up from the dishes and at her. She had long accepted that Bima was the only person who knew that Firaz's fists occasionally flew like the black vultures over the desert of her body, that Bima knew more about the strangeness of her marriage than any friend or family member. But now Sarah felt as if Bima had an eyeglass to her soul, that she had somehow penetrated her body deeper than Firaz ever had. "Better?" Bima asked unsmilingly. In reply, Sarah raised her arm so that Bima could see the receding marks on her skin. The older woman nodded briskly. "By tomorrow morning there will be no signs at all." Sarah felt her face flush with what Bima had not said. No signs of Firaz's brutality. That was what Bima had wanted to say. Mortification made Sarah turn her head away, so she didn't notice that Bima had abandoned the kitchen sink and taken a few steps toward her, drying her hands on her sari as she walked. Okay, so I think part of this is, for me, a taste issue, that this language is way too flowy and lyrical, purple maybe even, for my tastes, and that it's to me, it just detracts from, the emotional stakes on the page. So we have Sarah. We ultimately learn that she's being beaten by her husband. I mean, that's what these bruises are about. And we're in a place where she wakes up and the bruise has, shrunk in size. There's, the metaphors about maps and that sort of thing. But the main interaction she has on this page is with the older woman, Bima. And Bima is the one person, it seems like, who knows about the abuse and is tending to Sarah. But there's complications there as well. It seems like the complications would be that Sarah may feel guilty or ashamed about what's happening, and Sarah's very intimate knowledge of her, and Bima's very intimate knowledge about her life that nobody else has. And then Bima herself, there's a little bit, that she, she's a caretaker, but there's something, at least in when she's talking, that's, a little brusque. And, she's not maybe, the emotional, syrupy caretaker. She's just doing her business to help, I guess. And I just feel like that's really intriguing, but just the language, the flowery language, like describing beatings as hands flying over the desert of a body, I just feel like that detracts from the reality of it. And I assume this language works for some people, and it's very pretty, but I just feel like, to me, what grabs me more within this setting is the idea of how Sarah is dealing with this reality, that she's being abused, that nobody knows about it, that it's her husband, and there could be, cultural issues involved. And then she has this person in her life who actually is providing great help and even comfort maybe to her, but yet the fact that she knows the secret is also a bit of a sticking point. So that's interesting stuff, but I think we're getting more flowery language than we're getting character development. Book number 2 is Last Summer at the Golden Hotel by Alyssa Friedland, which is the only one I'll be reading in real time right now. Amy, though. She would rely on her daughter to be her eyes. Amy, who was attached to the hotel, but not with the same fierceness. She could see its flaws. The grandchildren, too, but Louise wasn't particularly interested in their criticism. Zach was wearing a t-shirt with Che Guevara on it, though Louise doubted he knew who he was. Or at least she hoped he didn't, not that she intended to get into a political debate with the boy who'd needed an extra year to complete a geography degree, and who probably couldn't find Cuba on a map. though he had given them all a shock when he'd inquired about the business terms of the offer. That was more than Maddie had had to offer. She had blathered on about mothballs for most of the evening. "Sweetheart, I was just thinking about you," Louise said when she bumped into her daughter in the corridor leading up to the boardroom. To her surprise, Amy had traded last night's flats for a kitten heel, and she looked rosy for the morning summit. Was that bronzer on her cheekbones? Bravo, Louise wanted to say. Amy's dress was a black cotton with a small daisy design, belted at the waist, a modern take on an older silhouette. She was happy to see a return in fashion to celebrating feminine curves. Those androgynous outfits some women wore, they made Louise shudder. Imagine a woman wearing a tuxedo to the Oscars and all the critics cheering her on. Unthinkable, truly. Andy the blouse man, who came to the hotel on Tuesdays, was the person who had first taught Louise the importance of cinching at the waist. He taught many of the women at the hotel a heck of a lot more than just fit. When his trailer door was shut, it signaled a private showing to a good customer. Okay, so there's a lot going on this page. I feel like to a certain degree it's relatively easy to follow. Louise, we're in her head. She's the matriarch of a sort, at least the oldest member of all the family members, and she wants to come to some sort of serious sort of decision about the hotel, which, my bias would say might have something to do with the fact that this is their last summer at the Grand Hotel, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it next. And Louise cottons onto her daughter completely to say, she's sentimental, but, she won't go too far with that. And the grandchildren she's mostly judgmental about. Like, one is kind of, I guess, vapid in terms of what she had to offer, and the other one, is politically unfit or whatever. So yeah, you can tell from the off too, this character does, have a lot of character. She's judgmental about a lot of things and a lot of people. That's kind of, fun to follow in a way. A little eye-rolly about, the commentary, I suppose, about fashion and all of that. Like, just let people live, lady. I don't know. And meanwhile, then I think the ending is a little, it just takes us in a completely different direction. I don't know if that's saying something about the character, being flighty or, not being able to focus, but suddenly she's remembering the past about the tailor, or at least I think it might be the past. I'm not sure. But then, the very end of that last paragraph seems to imply that this tailor was having relations, but maybe that's me reading more into it than I should. Anyway, I do feel like a lot of these characters really pop, but, it is like a lot going on the page, not necessarily a whole lot of focus. And finally, Book 3 is Evening by Nessa Rappaport. Part of me is mocking the pathos of my return, but irony is extinguished by desire, which will not be tamped down by any paltry appeal to reason. The club dims until Laurie is a wraith, shadowed hair, gleaming eye, mouth engraved. He is dark, but I am ablaze, as if I have guzzled light, the reincarnation of first love compounded by grief. The last set begins. After a single chord, I recognize the song Laurie played for me in his room the night our friendship alchemized into love. An anarchy of refusal electrifies my body, scalp to soul, defying all the chastening elders who relish denunciation, who issue their trivializing edicts about maturity and acceptance and compromise. I do not have to listen to you. Don't do it, says Tam, or you. The lead singer takes the mic. It was homeward bound one night on the deep. Laurie sets down his glass. The singer wails, I dreamed a dream and thought it true. Laurie's fingers cross the dented metal of the table. Between my legs is a metronome of coveting. Stand, it says, I stand. Move, it says, and I move. Okay, so I have a more complicated, I guess, reaction to this one. I feel like I want to like this, type of writing that's so sort of full of itself. Maybe that really says it all, that I really do feel like most of the phrasing in here is just style over substance, although I do like, what is it, the night our friendship alchemized into love. I'll give you that one. I did like that one, but otherwise I feel like she's dancing around the issue with these vagaries to try to say that, these feelings are so emotional or whatever. But unlike the other two stories, which this one also seems to be about a relationship, I assume what I can glean from this is a relationship with Lori. They're at a club, they're listening to music while sitting at a table. Together, and that she might be responding to him as the music goes and his hand goes, that sort of thing. But it's also internal and interior, all of her thoughts. It's not about, most of it is not explaining anything specific or, detailed about what happened to them tangibly in the real world. It's all about her feelings and desires and, how there's authority figures that are telling her she would be immature, I guess, and this Tam person we don't know, but obviously that's not fair to be too judgmental about not knowing him or her. Or I want to, I wonder if I read the whole story, I might have gotten more invested in this type of writing and understood it better. But certainly on its own, it really just doesn't stand up. There's just not a lot to intrigue you about what's happening on the page, because really it's all happening in this character's head. And it's just really too vague to be intriguing. It's interesting because sometimes I feel like I'm judging too much exposition in the other stories, like, well, this is a convenient show of exposition, but at the same time, it certainly makes the stories approachable and immediately interesting, whereas this one doesn't have that. So I think I'm going to set this one down. Okay, let me start by striking down my third place book, I guess. And I think once again it's going to be Evening by Nessa Rappaport, which at the very least is me telling you that I am trying to play by the real rules of the game, because even though I was drawn to the fact that I wanted to read the shortest book, and this is the shortest book, I still have a lot of pause about just the pretentiousness of the language. Maybe I'm being unfair to it. I am very happy that this book is on my TBR, my Goodreads TBR, which means no matter how many times I play with it in the page 112 tag and put it down, I will ultimately read it. So at least there's that. And that leaves my options up to these two, The Space Between Us and Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. And I think both of these were compelling in some ways, including this one. Once again, I was a little, I think, critical of some of the writing style choices. But at the same time, I think it told a pretty cohesive story on the page. It was pretty easy to follow the through line of the story about the abuse and how it informs the relationship between these two women. And I wonder if I'm being a little harsh on it. I felt like I was being a little harsh all these times on Evening by Nessa Rappaport, and now I wonder if I'm being a little too harsh on The Space Between Us. And it has a little more of a through line anyway than The Last Summer at the Golden Hotel. So I do think that means I'm going to put this book down, and I'm going to choose this book for my May TBR. And, dive in a bit to these relationships and allow for a little bit of flowery language about it, perhaps, and we'll see where it goes. All right, on to the 2026 Buzzwordathon prompt. Well, Buzzwordathon's been around BookTube for a while, started by Kayla at Books and Lala. Her first impetus was to choose title prompts, and she would go to, I guess, the last year's trends, I guess, in publishing. She'd look at trends in the titles, and then she would create a series of yearly prompts based on that. And then a couple of years ago, she did the same thing, except that she was looking at trends with covers, and then she made a set of yearly prompts based on that. And that's what I'm doing of the two of them. I am focusing on the covers prompts. And that's because I'm hoping to slot in books from a really large book haul that I did last summer called Raid the Shelves. So Raid the Shelves is actually a real event that takes place at the Jewish Book Council's headquarters in Manhattan. The Jewish Book Council is a website I basically live on, and I'm constantly adding, especially their fiction, to my TBR lists. So I went there last summer and also the year before, and I got really huge hauls out of the whole deal. All you have to do is pay a fee, and then you have access to their whole collection. They have like lots and lots of books that were given to them by publishers and what have you, and they're trying to, you know, pare it down a bit and get some space back, I guess, and to our benefit, to those of us who love the Jewish Book Council. So I'm glad that I got a huge, you know, stack of books, but then I want to go ahead and try to justify that. So I am slotting them all into the Buzzwordathon cover prompts as best I can, because technically I think the cover prompts are a little more genre-based than my haul is. So sometimes it's a little bit of a creative fit, but I make it work. As you can see, I have been diligently reading every prompted book per month so far, and now we're into May. And the May prompt is actually, I think, a relatively easy one. I feel pretty confident about. We're supposed to pick a book with a frame border. And so I am going with Foreign Seed by Alison Alsop, which, as you can see, there is a frame around the book. It's true that the edges of the frame at the bottom are under the water, I think, but then if I turn the book around, there, you know, is a frame again, and you can see the bottom a bit more clearly. So I definitely think that this counts. And anyway, that about covers it for me. I will leave Goodreads links to all of these books listed down below in case you'd like more information. I'll also leave links to the bookstores I mentioned and information on Buzzwordathon, and a playlist to all of my past TBR games, which is mostly page 112 tags I've played throughout the years. I also do play a quarterly TBR game called The Books Who've Spin, so those videos are there as well. And yeah, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts about any of these books if you've read them, or if you're taking part in any TBR games, what types of books you've gotten, and if you're excited to be adding them to your TBRs. Anyway, enough with adding books to my TBR. It's time to start reading them, so expect me back here on this channel in the next few days with my next Am Reading update video. Huzzah! And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.